Have you ever wondered why Japanese students consistently rank among the top performers in global education systems? What if I told you their secret isn't about studying longer hours or having superior genetics, but about a specific learning technique rooted in neuroscience that could triple your learning speed starting today? This isn't some mystical ancient wisdom or trendy life hack. It's a scientifically validated approach that rewires how your brain processes and retains information. Right now, your brain is working at a fraction of its potential, and what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you approach learning anything in your life. Before we dive deep into this transformative method, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss content that could genuinely change your cognitive abilities. And if you're serious about unlocking your brain's full potential, show your commitment by leaving a like on this video. These simple actions tell the algorithm to share this life-changing information with more people who need it. Here's the problem most of us face. We live in an information age where knowledge doubles every 12 hours, yet we're still using learning methods from the industrial era. You sit down to study something new, and within hours, most of that information has evaporated from your memory. You read an entire book, and a week later, you struggle to recall the main concepts. You attend training sessions at work, take notes, feel motivated, but when it's time to apply that knowledge, your mind goes blank. This isn't your fault. The traditional approach to learning completely ignores how your brain actually works. We've been taught to be passive recipients of information, to memorize through repetition, to cram before exams. But your brain wasn't designed to learn this way. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. No matter how much water you pour in, most of it leaks out. The frustration goes deeper than just forgetting information. Every time you fail to retain what you've learned, it chips away at your confidence. You start believing you're not smart enough, that learning new skills isn't for you, that your brain just doesn't work like those naturally gifted people. But research in neuroplasticity has proven that your brain can reorganize itself throughout your entire life. The issue isn't your capability, it's your methodology. Now let's talk about what Japanese educators discovered decades ago and what neuroscience is now confirming. The method is called Kaizen learning, combined with a technique known as active recall through interval repetition. But the Japanese approach adds something most Western adaptations miss entirely. They integrate a concept called ma, which translates roughly to meaningful space or pause. This isn't just about taking breaks. It's about strategically creating mental space that allows your brain to consolidate information at a neurological level. Here's how your brain actually forms lasting memories. When you learn something new, your neurons create temporary connections. Think of these like footpaths through a forest. The first time someone walks through, they leave barely a trace. But if that same path gets walked repeatedly with specific timing, it becomes a permanent trail. Your brain works the same way. The Japanese method leverages this by using precisely timed intervals of learning and rest that align with your brain's natural consolidation rhythms. Let me break down the neuroscience so you understand why this works. When you actively recall information from memory rather than passively reviewing it, you trigger a process called retrieval practice. Studies from cognitive psychology show that this single act of pulling information from your memory strengthens neural pathways up to 300% more effectively than simply rereading the same material. But here's where the Japanese twist comes in. They don't just practice retrieval randomly. They do it in specific intervals that match the forgetting curve discovered by psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus. The forgetting curve shows that you lose roughly 50% of newly learned information within 1 hour if you don't actively work to retain it. By the next day, you've lost about 70%. Within a week, nearly 90% is gone. But if you actively recall that information at specific intervals, right before you're about to forget it, you reset this curve and the information moves from short-term to long-term memory storage. The Japanese implementation works like this. After learning something new, you take a deliberate pause, usually 5 to 10 minutes, where you do something completely different. This is the Ma principle. During this pause, your brain begins the initial consolidation process. Then comes the first active recall. Without looking at your notes or source material, you attempt to reconstruct what you just learned. Write it down, explain it out loud, draw diagrams. whatever forces your brain to retrieve the information. This first recall happens roughly 20 minutes after the initial learning session. The brilliance of this timing isn't arbitrary. Neuroscientist Dr. Lila Davachi from Columbia University has shown that our brains have rest period learning windows. When you take these strategic breaks, your hippocampus, the brain region responsible for forming new memories, actually replays the information you just learned at a much faster speed. It's like your brain is practicing in the background without your conscious awareness. But this only happens if you give it the space to do so. If you keep cramming more information without these pauses, you interrupt this crucial consolidation process. The second recall happens after one day. Again, no peeking at your materials. Force your brain to work. Pull that information from memory. You'll notice this recall is harder than the first one, and that difficulty is exactly what strengthens the memory. Jim Quick, one of the world's leading experts on accelerated learning and brain performance, emphasizes that learning isn't comfortable. The struggle to remember is where the actual learning happens. When something feels easy, you're not creating new neural pathways. You're just traveling the same old routes. The third interval comes at 1 week. By this point, if you've done the previous recalls correctly, the information should feel more stable in your memory. But you still actively recall it without aids. The fourth interval is at 1 month, and the fifth is at 3 months. After this 5-stage process, the information has typically moved into your long-term memory storage where it can remain accessible for years or even a lifetime. But the Japanese method adds additional layers that make it even more powerful. They emphasize quality over quantity. Instead of trying to learn everything at once, they focus on small, manageable chunks of information. This concept, called microlearning, aligns perfectly with your working memory capacity. Research shows that your brain can only hold about 4 chunks of information in working memory at any given time. When you try to learn too much at once, you overwhelm this system and retention plummets. The Japanese approach respects these limitations by breaking learning into bite-sized pieces that your brain can actually process effectively. Another critical component is multisensory engagement. When Japanese students learn, they don't just read. They write by hand, speak the information out loud, create visual representations, and sometimes even add physical movement. Neuroscience reveals that each sense you engage creates additional neural pathways to the same piece of information. It's like creating multiple trails to the same destination in that forest. If one path gets blocked, you have others to reach the information. Studies from the University of Indiana showed that writing by hand, specifically, activates regions of the brain that aren't engaged during typing, leading to significantly better retention and understanding. There's also a mindset element that Japanese education emphasizes, which Western approaches often overlook. They view mistakes and forgetting as essential parts of the learning process, not as failures. When you fail to recall something during active retrieval practice, your brain actually encodes the correct information more strongly once you review it. This is called the hypercorrection effect. The bigger the gap between what you thought and what's actually correct, the stronger the memory becomes when you fix it. So those moments when you struggle and get it wrong aren't setbacks. They're actually accelerating your learning. Let me give you a practical example of how you might apply this to learning a new skill, let's say public speaking. You watch a 20-minute training video on voice projection and body language. Immediately after, you take a 10-minute break where you do something completely different, maybe take a walk or do some stretching. This gives your brain that crucial space. After 20 minutes total, you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and write everything you can remember from the video without looking back at it. You explain the concepts in your own words, draw stick figures showing the body language principles, whatever helps you reconstruct the information. One day later, before refreshing your memory by rewatching anything, you do the same exercise. Try to recall and reconstruct everything about voice projection and body language. You'll probably struggle more than the first time, and that's perfect. After you've exhausted your memory, then you can go back and review what you missed. But notice the sequence. You attempt retrieval first, struggle with it, then review. Not the other way around. This sequence is critical. 1 week later, same process. 1 month later, again. 3 months later, final recall. By the end of this cycle, those public speaking principles aren't just memorized. They're integrated into how you think and operate. Now let's address something important. This method requires patience and trust in the process. We live in a culture that values speed and instant results. The idea of spacing your learning over weeks and months might feel counterintuitive when you're used to cramming everything the night before. But here's what research consistently shows. Cramming might get you through a test tomorrow, but you'll have forgotten almost everything within 2 weeks. Spaced repetition feels slower initially, but it creates learning that lasts. You're not just memorizing, you're actually changing your brain structure. Dr. Barbara Oakley, who teaches the world's most popular online course on learning how to learn, explains that there are 2 modes of thinking. Focused mode, where you're concentrating directly on the material, and diffuse mode, where your mind wanders and makes unexpected connections. The Japanese method strategic pauses activate diffuse mode thinking, which is where creative insights and deep understanding often emerge. Many breakthroughs in science, art, and innovation happen during these diffuse moments, not during intense focus. By building these pauses into your learning process, you're leveraging both modes optimally. There's also something profound about the simplicity of this approach. You don't need expensive courses, special technology, or exceptional natural talent. You need discipline, consistency, and respect for how your brain works. The Japanese have a term, shokunin, which refers to a craftsman who pursues their work with dedication and mastery. This method embodies that spirit. You're crafting your own mind, deliberately and skillfully, through conscious practice. Let me share what happens when you make this your default learning approach. First, you'll notice that new information sticks with much less effort. What used to require hours of review now feels natural after following the intervals. Second, your confidence in your learning ability skyrockets. When you experience yourself retaining complex information months after learning it, you start to believe in your cognitive potential. Third, you develop metacognition, which means awareness of your own thinking processes. You become conscious of how you learn best, what works for you personally, and how to adapt techniques to different subjects. Jim Quick often talks about the concept that learning isn't about how smart you are, but about the methods you use. He emphasizes that your brain is like a muscle. The more you train it with effective techniques, the stronger it becomes. The Japanese method provides that effective training protocol. It respects your brain's biological needs for consolidation, challenges it with active retrieval, and builds lasting neural architecture through spaced repetition. Here's the transformative part. Once you've mastered this approach with one skill or subject, you can apply it to absolutely anything. Want to learn a new language? Use these intervals. Need to master a technical skill for work? Same process. Trying to understand complex scientific concepts? The method works. It's universal because it's based on fundamental brain function, not subject-specific tricks. Think about the compounding effect over time. If you can learn things 3 times faster and retain them significantly longer, how does that change your life trajectory? In 1 year of consistent application, you could master skills that would have taken others 3 years. In 5 years, you could develop expertise that typically requires 15 years. This is an exaggeration. It's mathematics combined with neuroscience. The difference between someone who uses their brain's natural learning systems effectively and someone who fights against them is exponential over time. Now I want to address a common concern. Some people worry that spacing learning over time means they'll learn slower in the short term. Here's the reality. Yes, if you have a test in 2 days, cramming might serve you better for that immediate goal. But if you're learning for actual mastery, for real-world application, for skills you need to use months and years from now, there's no comparison. Spaced repetition wins overwhelmingly. And here's something interesting. Once you've built strong foundational knowledge through this method, you actually can learn related information much faster because you have a solid framework to attach new concepts to. The Japanese educational system has produced remarkable results not because their students are inherently different, but because their methods align with cognitive science. When you work with your brain instead of against it, learning transforms from a frustrating struggle into a natural, almost enjoyable process. You start to experience those moments of insight where everything clicks into place. You find yourself remembering details effortlessly that would have slipped away before. You become the person who actually retains and applies what they learn. Let me leave you with this reality. Everything valuable in life requires learning. Better relationships require learning emotional intelligence and communication skills. Career advancement requires learning new competencies. Health and fitness require learning about nutrition and exercise science. Personal fulfillment requires learning about yourself and your purpose. If you can accelerate and deepen your learning ability, you literally accelerate every area of your life. This Japanese method isn't just about memorizing facts faster. It's about becoming a more capable, confident, competent version of yourself. The neuroscience is clear. Your brain has extraordinary potential that most people never tap into because they're using outdated learning methods. Active recall, spaced repetition, strategic pauses, multisensory engagement, and embracing difficulty as part of the process. These principles work. They've been validated by decades of cognitive research and centuries of practical application in Japanese education. The question isn't whether this method works. The question is whether you'll have the discipline to implement it. Starting today, pick one thing you want to learn. It could be professional, personal, creative, doesn't matter. Apply this 5-interval recall system to it. Learn the material, pause for 10 minutes, recall after 20 minutes, recall after 1 day, recall after 1 week, recall after 1 month, recall after 3 months. Track your progress. Notice how much more naturally the information stays with you compared to your old methods. Experience the difference for yourself. Don't just believe what I'm telling you. Prove it to yourself through direct experience. Your brain is the most sophisticated learning machine in the known universe. It can form new neural connections throughout your entire life. It can master incredibly complex skills with the right training approach. It can retain vast amounts of information when you work with its natural systems. The Japanese method gives you the keys to unlock these capabilities. What you do with those keys is entirely up to you. If this video has opened your eyes to a more effective way of learning, I need you to do 2 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already because we're dedicated to bringing you neuroscience-backed strategies for cognitive enhancement and personal development. Second, hit that like button to help this information reach more people who could benefit from it. Learning how to learn effectively is perhaps the most important skill you can develop in the modern world. Remember this, your potential isn't fixed. Your intelligence isn't predetermined. Your ability to learn and grow is limited only by the methods you use and the consistency with which you apply them. The Japanese discovered something profound about how human brains create lasting change. Now that knowledge is yours, use it wisely.